Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Tax Talk, broadcast by the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. My name is Jordan Bateman, and I'm the British Columbia Director of the CTF, and I'm joined, as always, by our Alberta Director, Paige McPherson.
Hello, Jordan.
Paige?
How are you?
Good, Paige. On behalf of all British Columbians, I'd like to apologize for our Premier obnoxiously taking a run at Alberta in the throne speech, even though you guys are a bunch of crazy overspenders and deserved it.
We did a little bit. It's true, but it's weird. I saw an article this morning saying no, she's reconfirmed that Alberta and BC are best friends, and that's why it was so important for her to address this. But what I'm wondering is, the important question: will Christy Clark be our Valentine?
Oh, one can only dream. One can only dream.
If we're best friends,
we're besties. It's true. It's true. Yes, we're besties, but we don't actually want to allow you to have any pipelines or access to our shore. We just want to take all of your skilled workers and put them to work on Site C. It's a great relationship, very healthy, no doubt. Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us here live on Blab for Tax Talk. In a few minutes, Paige and I are going to talk with Hamish Marshall, president of Torch Agency, and my co-author on our new book, Everyone But the People. There it is. The book chronicles our victorious grassroots campaign to defeat a regional sales tax in Greater Vancouver. It's part victory lap, part academic review of what happened during that campaign. But more about that in a few minutes. But welcome, Hamish, to the show.
Welcome. Thanks for having me, guys.
Hey, our pleasure.
yeah,
Lots of way for everyone to connect with us. If you've joined us here live, you can make sure to subscribe to our feed to keep track of all our shows. Hamish never goes on things like this, so feel free to give him lots of props in order to, feed his ego and make him want to come back to the social media. You can comment in the sidebar. Tweet us at Jordan Bateman or at Paige McP. Don't tweet Twitterless Hamish. However, that can be a hashtag if you like. Hashtag Twitterless Hamish. And you can even click call in to ask us a question live on video. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation is a nonprofit, nonpartisan advocacy organization dedicated to three things: lower taxes, less waste, and more government accountability. That's what drives all of the communications, research, and advocacy work we do. You can check out our website at taxpayer.com to see what we're all working on. And if you're listening to this later as a podcast or a video, we still want to hear from you. You can check out our website at taxpayer.com or email me, bc.director@taxpayer.com. All right, Paige, what's new?
So my what's new is Valentine's Day themed. I have a Valentine for the Alberta government, specifically for the Department of Health, Alberta Health. And it actually stemmed from something that was not that great. So Alberta posts its expenses online, and we can see, receipts. They're posted, and we have a Twitter account set up. It's at Alberta Expenses if anybody wants to follow it. And we tweet out the receipts, so you can see them piling up. And we noticed that there was one person who seemed to have a lot of expenses on town cars. Her name's Marilyn Smith. She's the chair of the Alberta and South Mental Health Review Panel. So she's traveling from Calgary to Lethbridge, Calgary to Canmore, Calgary to Medicine Hat. Not really that far distances, definitely drivable. And she's traveling with, now that I've talked to Alberta Health, with other panel members. And instead of renting a car or taking their personal car, as many of us would do when we would travel for work, it seems that she's taking a lot of town cars. That's pretty much looking like the exclusive way that she travels when it comes to any distance over like 15 minutes. So we looked into this. She spent nearly $27,000 on town cars in 1 year. And obviously, that's just simply not a justifiable expense. So we would like to give a Valentine to Alberta Health because they responded really well to this. So what we saw is when we reached out to them, they said, these are fair questions, and the use of town cars, they are expensive. And you know what? This is something that people could be driving their own vehicles. They could be renting their own vehicles. And now they've given a directive to those people to say, okay, where you can, take your own car. So we think that they deserve a Valentine for that.
Yeah, well, it's awesome news. I mean, how many times have we done these stories and they just kind of get swept under the rug and we never hear about them again? But actually taking action, kudos to Alberta Health.
Absolutely. What's new with you, Jordan?
Speaking of health, I put out some stats this week that show, here in British Columbia, we are unique in the country. We have a separate tax that helps fund the healthcare system called the Medical Services Premium Tax. And the basic theory behind it is the Premier wants you to know that healthcare in Canada is not free. We're all paying for it. And so what better way to make us pay for it than to send us each a monthly bill right there with our cable and our natural gas and all the other bills that come in. We get a bill for the medical services premium tax. Well, in the past 15 years, the Liberals have doubled this tax. And just in the past 5 years, it's increased 40%, far beyond the rate of inflation. To the point now where for my family, it's $150 a month. That's on top of all of our income taxes. So there's been a real groundswell in the past year. We've been working on this file for about 4 years. But in the past year, we've seen a real groundswell of people saying, look, this is too expensive. The way it's structured is unfair. It costs about $150 million extra to collect this tax because it's not part of income tax. And we've been really pushing for some changes. And it sounds like the Liberals in the budget next week are going to finally change that. But this week I put out some stats from the Freedom of Information request that we did. And it found that 850,000 British Columbians were at least 31 days behind on their MSP. And that totaled about $500 million. So a lot of money, a lot of discussion in the media as to why that is. It's partly because people can't afford the tax anymore. It's partly because we live in Canada and no one thinks they're going to be turfed out of an emergency room if they haven't paid their MSP. Lots of issues with this tax, but the Liberals seem to be ready to respond next Tuesday in the budget with some sort of changes. And it sounds like they're going to promise perhaps even more changes in the future, which is something we've been pushing for a long time. So
what kind of changes do you have any anticipation of what the government might propose?
No, they've already changed it a little bit where they've lowered the costs for single parent families. That was a good start because it was the first time the Liberals admitted something was wrong with that tax. So that was positive. They're close to the vest what they're going to do, but the Premier did say it would be broad. It would be, across the board, and that she wanted to look at the system again. So in our pre-budget submission, we suggested they freeze the tax for a year and review it, get a bunch of this data out. Let's figure out if this tax is actually accomplishing what they think it's accomplishing. Because right now, you have to dig it out through FOI and things like that. Let's find out, and then you can actually go and review it. Good to remember, May 2017 is an election year, so they'll be running on their February 2017 budget. So what better, two-step than doing a little bit this year and then promising major change next year going into the election.
Interesting. That you just reminded me of something because you mentioned that, Premier Clark in her, I guess it was the speech from the throne was sort of, critical of Alberta and we talked about that. There was actually some pretty good analysis on a radio show here in Calgary on News Talk 770. It was the Roger and Rob show. And they were talking about how it is an election year coming up and how the BC Liberals government there is going to be taking on the NDP and maybe that throwing shade, as it's called, onto Alberta had more to do with the fact that Alberta has an NDP government than the fact that we're big spenders. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. They want to point out that the NDP are running Alberta into the ground. Not that the Conservatives were doing such a fantastic job running the place before that, but convenient truth. The idea, the last thing they want to do is give any opportunity for the BC NDP to run on the same hopey, changey, everything's going to be all right, rainbows and unicorns platform of the Alberta NDP. Mm-hmm,
mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought that was interesting. It was something it hadn't occurred to me. But that's true. Anyway, that's interesting. Well, that sounds like a really positive development in that tax. I know that the health premium here in Alberta was a big election issue in the last election that we had, because the PCs were proposing to basically bring it back in, and because we've had it before, and the NDP said no. And although the NDP government has obviously raised a laundry list of taxes or introduced new ones, the carbon tax is coming in. I mean, there is obviously a whole host of taxes here, but that was one that they actually said they weren't going to bring back in, which I think, considering this does seem to be a pretty tax-happy government, shows the unpopularity of these kinds of health services taxes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's growing in unpopularity here in BC. There's a 60,000 person petition, grassroots done that is asking for it to be scrapped. That was presented to the legislature by a Green MLA this week. So things are moving along, and knock on wood, hopefully we get some changes.
Well, that's
great.
Hamish,
anything interesting going on?
Well, I saw that story. I don't know if you guys saw it a couple of days ago that said that the federal government's going to spend $100 million of the military budget on retooling military bases for refugees and actually turn a bunch of the bases into refugee camps, essentially, which is, I think, kind of a tricky way of doing things because obviously they don't want to put out more numbers about how their refugee plans have not worked out, and more to the point, how much money is being spent on it. But so what they're actually doing is taking the money right out of the D&D budget, which either means that the Canadian forces will have to make do with less, or ultimately they'll have to raise taxes or borrow more in order to pay for it all. So that could be as much as $100 million. They're now sort of backing off a little bit of that, but we'll see exactly what the total number is going to be. But for something that was originally supposed to have a large number of private sponsorships, and this is the sort of thing that community groups and faith organizations were going to sponsor, this whole policy of trying to hit these huge refugee numbers for no discernible purpose is, I think, going to end up costing taxpayers an awful lot of money.
Yeah. You got to think, I haven't looked at the research on this, but you've got to think that refugees who are brought in by groups, churches, community groups, they must have a better success rate at integrating into, adapting to life in Canada and all those things than sort of what the government does, which brings them in, houses them at these refugee camps, and then kind of releases them into the wilds of Canada.
Right.
It just seems to me it just seems to me that, they should be doubling down on partnering with these groups and trying to encourage every church in Canada, for example, to adopt a family almost.
Yeah, I can't imagine what it must be like being like a refugee coming from a war zone and coming to a country where you don't speak the language, you don't know anybody, and be brought by some organization that is providing you with support and people who can try to explain to you what's going on in Canada and everything else. I think would make a massive difference in the outcomes.
Interesting. I had somebody call me who works with homeless people, volunteers for a homeless organization, which is something that I do as well, and called me and said, geez, was this an option? Was taking people who don't have homes an option, putting them into these, military camps, was this an option on the table all along? I think it's a really interesting point, right? Because we, not to say that, of course it's a horrible situation and these refugees do need a place to go, but we have a lot of people in Canada that need a place to go as well. And so, this was sort of when it was first in the news, and they were saying, well, we do have some unused space. And anyway, so this homeless organization saying, how long have you had this unused space for? How long was this, an option that we could have been using as well?
Right, and it brings up the whole question is what was these bases built for, right? Are they supposed to be military bases, or are they supposed to now just sort of be general purpose accommodation where the government can put in people? And, I think that's a big question. It's something we don't see anywhere else. Even in France and Germany, they're not using military bases for this sort of thing, and they've brought in far more refugees than we're talking about. So it's sort of a uniquely Canadian bad idea, I think. And ultimately, I think taxpayers are going to end up having to pay a whole bunch more for it, or our soldiers and sailors are going to have to make do with less. Neither of which is a particularly good idea, as far as I'm concerned.
Bad idea, Hamish. Surely you mean badass idea. What with the National Defense Minister being well known for that particular horrible article written by his future DCOM or whatever.
Yeah, funny how that works.
Yeah.
All right,
Paige,
can we get right into this? I'm excited to talk to you guys about this. Okay, so you've got the No TransLink Tax campaign in the Lower Mainland of BC. You've got this new book about it. This is a pretty classic David and Goliath story when you look at the amount of money that you guys spent versus the amount of tax dollars that were used to fight against you, fight for this tax. And of course, I think that it left a lot of people wondering, well, how did you do it? And of course, that's why you've released this book, and that's why it's exciting. And, for anybody who likes campaigns, who's interested in strategy and tactics, but also maybe just interested in these kinds of issues, it's a really good book to read. I've read it. It really is a page turner. I was saying before we started the podcast, a lot of these books are, they've got a lot of great information, but they're really not page turners. They're a tiny bit boring. This really is an exciting story. So we're going to give everybody who's watching now a little taste about what this book is all about, and you can tell a bit of the story, but then I know people can pick it up. First, maybe right off the bat, why don't you tell people how they can pick up this book?
Sure. The easiest way is go to No TransLink Tax book.ca, or you can search for it on Amazon. But if you go to No TransLink Tax book.ca, it will just take you right to the page, and you can buy it with one click. And we're still sort of in the pre-order phase in Canada. It costs $15, but it'll be shipped to you the split second the printing is ready.
Great Valentine's Day gift for your Valentines, everybody out there.
Great idea.
Yeah.
Okay,
now
so
we know Jenny and Catherine. They're both getting No TransLink Tax books signed by the authors.
Absolutely. Oh wow.
Alan's getting one too. No author signing, but that's it's a popular Valentine's Day gift already, just in this circle. Okay, so
I'll sign Alan's next time in Calgary.
Feel free to forge my signature page.
So we're going to get into the story shortly, but I want to know, first of all, why did you write this book? And maybe each of you can tell a little bit about why it's important to get this story out via this book. Start with you, Jordan.
Well, first of all, the CTF, it's a bit for history purposes more than anything. What I was discovering was in the media accounts after the vote, it was all the yes side forces who were shaping the way the campaign was being reflected upon. So, they never had a chance, and all these other, just frankly spins and covering their butts comments that seemed to be they seemed to be taking over the media narrative. So we felt we should have a book that kind of laid out, look, we didn't just luck into this victory. We had a plan, we had strategy and tactics, we stuck to a message, and we wanted to get that out. Second, we wanted to make sure we kept the institutional knowledge at the CTF. 5-10 years from now, there may be another referendum somewhere else in the country on a sales tax, and future directors can read this book, get a sense of what we did, see what worked, and transport some of those ideas to other places. And then finally, one thing about transportation issues is they are well studied, and there's massive school of transportation policy universities across around the world. And I've already been contacted. Yesterday, I sat down with a young guy from UBC who's doing a thesis on the campaign. I'm meeting with a doctor of public policy from Australia later this month. So we wanted to have some of this stuff in a book form just to help them as they try to figure out what exactly happened in that referendum.
That's so cool. Wow, that's getting so much pickup. Hamish, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's mostly what Jordan said about the idea of setting the narrative. The people who, in 5 years or 10 years, no one's going to remember the details of the campaign, the ins and out days and days, and what happened in the book. The book will lay out, the story, and that will be the story. So, we think we did something pretty remarkable. So we wanted to make sure that everybody had a chance to see what was accomplished.
Mm-hmm. It's also a bit of a love letter to our people, as Hamish and I called them during the campaign, the grassroots everyday folks who took the tools that we provided, or took their favorite messaging stories and just took it to a level that we never expected. I mean, the passion of the grassroots in this, that's my favorite part of the book, is telling the stories of just average everyday Joes going out and trying to convince their friends and neighbors and family to vote no.
Yeah, it's just so grassroots. So if anybody who's watching knows any of those people who were involved at the grassroots level of the campaign, again, it's a love letter. So again, great Valentine's Day gift. And if you know anybody who is on the yes side of the campaign pushing for the sales tax, and you maybe are in a relationship with them and you want to break up with them, this is also a great gift for that. Okay, so let's get to the story then. Jordan, maybe you can start it off at the top from the beginning. So first of all, why were you motivated to launch this campaign? And I want to make sure that you tell the story that you have in the book about how you were doing a media interview and were told that you were the only guy opposing it. Maybe you can start there.
Yeah, well, for us at the CTF, this just violated our 3 core principles. I outlined them at the beginning of every Tax Talk live show. Lower taxes. Obviously, this was a tax increase. And it was a tax that no other city or region in Canada has. There's no such thing as a city-specific sales tax across Canada. And if you let municipal governments get into the sales till, we're never getting them out. So that was the first point. The second was less waste. TransLink is an incredibly wasteful agency. During the campaign, we rolled out more than 80 concrete examples, documented examples of TransLink waste. So we wanted to push back on that. They didn't deserve more of our money. And then finally, accountability. We do believe in direct democracy at the CTF. And when there are direct democratic questions that line up with our values, we feel like we need to weigh in and push for them. The classic story was on February 3rd, and I'm up early at Global BC's morning news show, and the mayors had started refusing to appear on camera with me. I guess they didn't want to look like they were fighting down with little Jordan Bateman. So Mayor Greg Moore from Port Coquitlam, who heads the Metro Vancouver Regional District, he's on the show. And he goes through a spiel. They give him 5 minutes, why people should vote yes and, and tax themselves and give TransLink a bunch more money. And finally, it comes to the end of his segment, and the hosts say, and coming up next will be Jordan Bateman from the no side to give his thoughts. And Moore snorts. And the host kind of looks at him, and Greg Moore says, "Oh, you found the only guy." What? You found the only guy opposed, Jordan Bateman. He's the only guy opposed to this tax. So he kind of wanders off the stage, and I go in for my segment. And of course, the first question is, "Hey, Mayor Moore says you're the only guy opposed. Is that true?" And I said, "Well, why is the mayor spending $5 million to try to convince little old me then to vote yes on this tax? I'm clearly not going to change my vote. Obviously, there's a lot more than just me out there." Mm-hmm. Precisely 5 months later, on July 3rd, I was back on that show the day after the victory, and I wasn't the only guy that day. I had 467,031 other people who had voted no, including Greg Moore's own community, where 68% of people voted against his tax. So, kind of a fun story about what happened.
Yeah, I love that. All right, so another thing that is in chapter 1, I guess that part was sort of in the foreword. So in chapter 1, you talk about sort of the moment or the day that you knew you'd win, when it seemed as though the yes side was conceding on your messaging, or sort of starting to agree with what you were saying to an extent, and a very important person got fired. So Hamish, I want to target this question to you because you are
Sure.
obviously a very skilled campaigner. So from the perspective of the campaign itself, how did you know this was the moment where the tides were turning and you knew you'd win?
Sure. Well, in order to explain that, I'm going to go back a bit. When we started the campaign, we made the decision that we had to define the question and define what the debate was about. If this was an election solely about, do you want better transit, we probably would have lost. And we knew that people didn't like TransLink. They thought it was wasteful. They thought it was inefficient. They thought it didn't work very well. So we knew it had to be about, do you trust TransLink with any more of your money? And if we were doing that, we had a good chance of winning. And so what happened is that over the course of the first sort of month and a half of the campaign, we were pounding away saying TransLink's wasteful, hitting all those points on a daily basis. And the yes side began to panic. They've been relaunching their campaign every 5 minutes. I mean, every day they seem to have a new campaign launch that was more or less the same 100 people in a room. And so eventually they decided they needed to show some big action. And they made a big miscalculation. What they did is they fired Ian Jarvis. And Ian Jarvis was the CEO of TransLink, who'd been running it for a few years and had come up through the ranks. He'd been the CFO before that, and being the ultimate TransLink insider responsible for the whole system. So they fired him on February the 11th. And a year ago today, actually, or yesterday, I guess. Right. And that was a big thing, because what it did, it validated to everybody that our criticisms of TransLink were fair and accurate. Before that, it was us saying TransLink is wasteful, and people might have had a feeling that that was the truth. But once they fired the CEO and said that TransLink needs a new direction, it needs to be run in a better way, they basically said their whole narrative is right. And we got a big boost in the polls from that. It was a huge mistake of theirs. And then they doubled down on it, because not only did they fire him as CEO, they said we're going to keep paying his salary for another year and a half. In fact, today they're still paying his salary of almost $400,000, and they're going to bring in another interim CEO for the princely sum of about $30,000 or $35,000 a month. And as a result, TransLink went from having one CEO to two. And so not only was our message validated, but every news story for a week was about how TransLink was the biggest proof point of their waste. They were now paying two CEOs to do one job poorly.
Wow. All right. So I guess
it was the classic. Paige, the classic analogy here is like in football, when you put a lot of pressure on the quarterback and the quarterback throws a bad interception. Mm-hmm. And the campaign had put so much pressure on these guys. They were trending in the wrong direction. The first poll had us 15 points down. The second poll a month later had us 4 points down, so within the margin of error. And we were trending up, they were trending down, and they threw this interception, and from there we just never looked back.
Yeah, no, it's great. I guess so from the campaign perspective, you very effectively frame the debate and or frame the question, the ballot box question, frame the issue. And once you do that in a campaign, I mean, it's very difficult for the other side to beat you there. I guess whoever gets to that question first, whoever gets to frame the question first has the upper hand there. Okay, so Hamish, I'm just going to stick with you for a second because I want to ask, I mean, I've heard a lot of this, and I mean, I'm sure you guys have as well, that, well, yeah, it's a given that you guys were going to win because who would ever vote for more taxes? Of course the no side was going to win. But when you read the book, you realize that this was quite an uphill battle for you guys looking at the polls. Maybe you can just speak to that a little bit.
Well, you know, we started out, the first poll had us amongst the side voters down at 14 points, I believe. But I actually just discovered, since we've written the book, there was another poll that was out in September of 2014 that had some sort of version of the ballot question that had us losing by 19 points. At least, maybe more. I have to go to track it down, but I heard about this. So we were down by a long shot. But it wasn't just that we were down, it's that we shouldn't have had the ability to recover. They had everybody on their side. That's why we call everybody but the people, or the book's called that. You know, they had almost every mayor, I think 18 of the 21 mayors. They had the provincial government and the provincial opposition on side. They had the Vancouver Board of Trade, the Surrey Board of Trade, all the big business organizations. They had all the big unions. They had the environmental movement. Everybody you can imagine who was used to talking to academics. Anybody who ever talked to a reporter regularly in Vancouver, in Greater Vancouver, was on their side. And it turns out they were going to spend about $7 million, the vast majority of it, taxpayers' money. So why wouldn't they win? They're 14, 15 points ahead. Anybody that they considered mattered was in favor of it, and they were going to outspend us. And we knew we were never going to match them in spending. Mm-hmm. You know, we dreamed of raising $150,000. In the end, we ended up at about 40. And so and huge chunks of the press were very sympathetic to their arguments as well. So we were in a very, very, very difficult position. And by rights, if you look at the, if someone was betting on this, so if one of the bookies was laying down a bet in November or December of 2014, we would have very, very small odds of winning this thing.
Mm-hmm.
They also controlled all the mechanics, right? They controlled the ballot question,
Absolutely.
The ballot timing. They controlled the rules. Their website appered in the ballot question, so people could go to their Yes Side website. I mean, every advantage was given to them. Really incredibly outrageous. Plus, they'd all just gone through a municipal campaign. So they had brand new voter lists. We never got a voter list. They had support lists. They had phone banks. They had everything in place. This apparatus had just been renewed. And what did we have? Just the people, essentially.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that's why the grassroots are just so important in this campaign.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So just so everybody knows, so it's about $40,000 versus about 7 million tax dollars. Is that, yeah. So, wow, that's insurmountable, although obviously not exactly because you guys won. But okay, so on that, just the fact that, you had all these big wigs working against you, Jordan. There's a part in the book where you talk about our former federal director, Gregory Thomas, who's also from the Lower Mainland of BC, giving you a call and sort of pushing you on this. No, I don't think not saying he was against the campaign, but sort of saying, look, you need to think long and hard about this. And I think challenging you in the way that media would. That's the impression I got. And saying, is it worth it? I mean, is it worth it to kind of tick off all the policy people? I mean, all of the mayors, all of these movers and shakers in the Lower Mainland of BC. So how did you make the ultimate decision that, yes, fighting this No TransLink Tax campaign was worth it, even if it meant getting all those people angry with you for a while?
Yeah, I mean, that was a pivotal conversation for me, and it really reinforced the importance of the litmus test of the CTF values, the lower taxes, less waste, more accountability. Because it didn't meet that, we felt like we had to weigh in. Mm-hmm. But Gregory was right. There could have been a big cost to us in other public policy endeavors we make. At the same time, winning solves a lot of those things. So you have a profile and a clout now that you can bring to various issues. And, frankly, I think that's been helpful on things like medical services premium taxes because people realize that we do speak for a large group of people, and that there are many people out there who agree with our views.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the case across the country. I mean, there are people here in Alberta that, mentioned the No TransLink Tax campaign. It's definitely I guess a good branding exercise for the CTF, or it ended up being because you guys worked so hard on it. Okay, let's see. So Jordan, just sticking with you for a moment, you had talked in the book about how TransLink as an organization was a bit of a thorn in the side of taxpayers for quite some time, and how our former BC directors talked about, they all seem to have sort of run-ins with this organization. Can you maybe give a little bit of the brief background, especially for people who don't live in the Vancouver area?
Yeah, so TransLink is the regional transit authority, a transit monopoly in the Lower Mainland. So they control all the buses, the SkyTrain rail system. They have commuter trains. They have 2 passenger ferries that Hamish used every day when he lived in Vancouver. So they control, and plus they own a couple of the bridges. They have a major road network. So they're everywhere. They take an incredible amount of tax dollars already. So they're about a $1.4 billion a year organization. They take a 17 cent a liter gas tax. They get a 5 cents from the federal government of their gas tax. They have a monthly levy on everyone's electricity bill. They take property taxes, and I'm missing a tax. Oh, they take parking taxes. They have a 21% parking tax. Just an outrageous number of ways that they take money from people. We haven't even gotten to fares and tolls yet. So there's always been this sense with the CTF that, TransLink, because, it's an unelected board. Yeah, there's the mayor's council that helps oversee some parts of their operations, but they get away with a lot less accountability than if they were, the city of Vancouver or a crown corporation. So the CTF has really picked up that cause over the years and pushed them for more efficiencies. And frankly, the waste stories that come out of TransLink are outrageous. TransLink is the agency that has their own police force that left a C4 explosive on an airplane during a training exercise, an Air Canada passenger jet. TransLink, it's not uncommon for them to build a wall and then rip it down and then build a new wall. And a year later, the mayors have long criticized TransLink for their waste, and yet inexplicably they were rushing to give them billions of dollars more, as if money would somehow solve their waste issues.
Right. So Hamish, maybe I'll ask you, I know that, you like us at the CTF, but what inspired you to get involved so directly with the CTF on this campaign?
Well, I'm, generally against new taxes. I don't like paying more taxes. I was a TransLink rider every day. I take the bus and the C bus to and from work. And I was, appalled at the amount I had to pay and the poor quality of service. And I know it's not like that in other places around the world, which means it must be down to their management. So I knew it was a wasteful organization. I knew lots of people felt the same way. And I've always had a bit of a desire to tweak the noses of the elites, and I like the idea of going up against all the entrenched elites, whether it's big business or big unions or big government and big green movement, and to beat them on behalf of the what could be more fun than that?
Mm-hmm, definitely. So, okay, so this was quite a long campaign. Maybe, Jordan, you can continue. And Hamish, you as well. It seems like to me, one of the biggest challenges would be, especially on an issue campaign like this, it's not like a federal election campaign or something where the media is all over it every day. You need to fight to stay in the media. You need to fight to get, keep the momentum going. So how did you guys keep the momentum going? Maybe I'll start with you, Jordan.
Yeah, the Premier promised this referendum in the May 2013 election, and voting started in February 2015.
Yeah.
Pardon me, March 2015. So it was basically a 2-year effort. I think I wrote a first draft 1-pager about what a campaign could look like in June 2013. We met with Hamish in early 2014. He started drafting a campaign plan. The real effort started, other than research and just kind of keeping TransLink in the news and keeping an eye on this, the real effort started though in December 2014. It basically was 7 months. Voting ran from mid-March to the end of May, and we sprinted through that entire thing. And, in December, they announced that they were going to do a sales tax, what the question would be. That was by far the mayor's best day. And from there, we just got ready. We decided that January 1st, we were going to come out guns blazing. We were going to, force this into the media's consciousness, put out some clever stuff. We put out some fare evasion statistics that we'd obtained through FOI. We put out a waste calendar showing 12 bad examples of TransLink waste that the media loved. I mean, the Legislative Press Gallery was calling me for copies for their reporters. We just kept hammering away through news releases, calling for fairness, anything we could do to try to remind the media that, look, we're out here, we're trying to fight this thing. Frankly, Insights West started doing monthly polling. That helped as well because that's a guaranteed news story. We just kept hammering away at it and trying to be as creative as possible. Trying to use whatever means we could to earn the media, and it worked.
So you mentioned news releases. I mean, I know there was some media stunts, that kind of stuff. Hamish, maybe with the momentum in mind and trying to keep that going, you can speak to some of the tactics and strategies that you employed.
Well, we knew we had to create our own news. We knew we had to be able to give the media something to talk about because there just simply wasn't, there was so much time. And that was a big part of what we did, besides acting as, I think, each other's therapists, because some days it did feel like it was just the two of us, and I don't know how many times we talked on the phone over that 7 months. My phone still thinks Jordan's one of my top contacts. So we did a few things. One was we came out, whenever the mayors were doing a big event, we would present Jordan as someone who could give the spin to it, make himself very accessible. So that was good. But one of the big things we did was on January 15th, we launched a new website. And with that, we launched what we call our Better Plan, because the biggest criticism of us from the yes side was, hey, you guys don't like new taxes, but what's your plan? What's your idea?
Yeah.
So we wrote a 75-page, fully costed document explaining many of the problems with the TransLink, and the way how they could pay for all the stuff planned out that they would have been out of this tax hike merely by allocating a very small portion of future spending growth to it. So we were able to push people to that, but that was a big thing. We got media out of that. We were able to then push back, and every time someone said, well, you guys have no plan, we say, yes, we do. Just go to notranslinktax.ca/betterplan and read it for yourself, which of course they didn't do. They just sort of puffed. But we ended up in a situation where we did that, and then we'd had other releases along the way. That we'd have FOI information coming out. We'd have
validators.
We did fun things on social media. Well, we'd have people who agreed with us would come out and write op-eds. Mike Smith, who's the mayor of West Vancouver, wrote an op-ed that we pushed out. Jody Emery, the so-called Princess of Pot, and who's an unexpected validator for us, wrote a phenomenal piece about why the tax was bad. Yeah. We even had a guy called Corky Day, who was the former chair of the Vancouver Greens, who took a very different approach than Jordan or I may have to this sort of thing. So we did that. We made a point of just continually having something to give the press, and we had a plan. We knew we had, basically 8 or 9 weeks between the beginning of January and when voting started. And then we needed to get things going for the first few weeks. So we really had to be producing content for about 10 weeks of stuff. And we actually produced day by day Waste of the Day awards, where we put out a social media meme every weekday. I think we ended up putting out 80 of them, which is over 16 weeks of examples of waste of TransLink to get people to share them around. And the sheer volume of that, I think, punched through as well.
Definitely. I'm really glad that you brought up that alternative plan, because that was, such an important part of that campaign. And then, the daily waste, that just speaks to how wasteful of an organization this was. If you've got much fodder to do those things every day, that's crazy.
And we had more. I think we ran out of days before we ran out of waste.
Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, and the great thing too, like on Facebook, our folks just shared things like crazy. So at the beginning, Hamish and I were trying to follow the Facebook rules, the collective wisdom, which is 1 or 2 posts a day. You don't want to oversaturate people. Our guys could not get enough stuff. And, towards the end, we were posting 8, 9, 10 times a day and seeing just engagement rates 5 or 6 times what the other side was getting. So really incredible what just the average person did with that information. We would share a graphic and it would go everywhere.
Yeah, it's very grassroots. It's great. Okay, well, this is all, such good information for anybody who, wants to undertake a campaign like this. I can tell you that there is something that Calgary City Council's Transportation Committee is looking at now, which is the option of a sales tax among other revenue tools. So, this fight across the country is definitely not over. But yours, obviously, is such a success story. So, Jordan, maybe you can just sum up by telling us, we started the interview with the moment you knew you'd win when, the CEO got fired. But when did you really know you'd win? When at the end were you thinking, okay, we've got this? Or did you not really know?
Yeah. Should I tell the truth, Hamish?
Sure.
I was a nervous wreck right to the bitter end. So, on June 30th, they announced the results would come out July 2nd. And poor Hamish, he had to send me a strongly worded tweet telling me to calm the F down because I was squirrely about it. And, you've seen the polls, but we didn't have any voter ID. We didn't have, what the other side had as far as sophisticated mechanisms to track who was voting. Yeah, exactly. I asked everyone, what do you think? Do you think we're going to win? Do you think we're going to win? You're going to think, and to their credit, none of them said that we would lose. Mm-hmm. Even the morning of, I'm sitting 50 minutes before the results are going to come out. I'm sitting in the lobby of Shaw Tower, and Mario Canseco, the pollster, happens to be walking by on his way to his office. And Mario was like, what are you worried about? You've got this in the bag. I've got it 58-42 for you guys. He was a little off. Hamish called it bang on. I was a nervous wreck right until I actually saw it refresh on the screen, and there were the results and the big 62-38 win. What
about you, Hamish? What did you think? Obviously you got the polling and you that's what you do, but what were you thinking? Were you a little worried?
Well, no, I don't know. It was very, once I saw what was going on, I saw what was happening on social media and everything else, and I was looking intently at the results. So what happened is every Wednesday, Elections BC would post the number of votes that had come in from each municipality. And I built out a whole model of when the votes were mailed to different municipalities and predicting all this stuff. And looking where the numbers were coming in from, I was very confident by sort of the end of March that we had it. And I certainly had my moments of doubt, but I didn't tell Jordan that. I was pretty sure by the end of March. It just was at that point. I just didn't see how we could lose based on the amount of votes that were coming in from places like Langley and Maple Ridge and Surrey. I knew it was good. We were going to be okay. But I have to admit, winning the city of Vancouver and New Westminster was a surprise. I thought we'd be close in the city of Vancouver. I thought we'd lose New Westminster by a lot. So winning both of those was a real cherry on top of a great day.
My favorite thing is there's this little cabal of New Westminster Twitter people. One of them is a city councillor, and they hate everything I do, but I just remind myself 55-45 in the city of New Westminster. So more of their people were with us than with them.
Yeah. That's great. Well, so obviously an exciting story. I'm glad that you guys shared it with them. So with all of us that are watching. So maybe one more time, just give a plug for where you can buy the book.
Sure. Buy it, No TransLink Tax book.ca, or search for it on Amazon. It's called Everyone But the People, because that's who we had with us, or that's who they had. They had everyone. They had everybody who mattered, but we had the people.
Yeah. Awesome story. Okay. And so we got a little bit of details here, but you can obviously find a lot more details in the book. So to sum up our Tax Talk podcast, I know we have a Waste of the Week story. Jordan, do you want to go through that?
Yeah, it's a quick one. So Waste of the Week, this, of course, is our example of how government is wasting our hard-earned tax dollars. And Paige, you're my colleague, our Ontario director, Christine. She obtained documents through the FOI Act that revealed during the federal election the Ontario government spent nearly $600,000 advertising their crazy Ontario retirement pension plan. This was a major part of the Trudeau Liberals' plank election campaign. It very much helped prop up the Trudeau Liberals at a time when the Liberals were trying to build support in Ontario. This includes actually $8,000 spent on Instagram to promote the ORPP. Nothing like trying to reach the youngsters on Instagram and talking about retirement pension plans. click your heart on your pictures from Kim Kardashian and Miley Cyrus, and the ORPP. I'm going to like that as well. Anyways, the timing helped prop up the Trudeau Liberals, and that fact is not lost on the province's Auditor General, who is not happy, and we're hoping that we're going to see some real concrete action to stop stuff like this in the future. Christine's calling on the Liberals to reimburse taxpayers for this waste. But most importantly, this is our Waste of the Week.
All right.
That's it for this episode of Tax Talk from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Be sure to follow Paige on Twitter at Paige McP or myself at Jordan Bateman. If you're watching this on Blab, subscribe to our feed. And if you're listening to this on iTunes, please subscribe and give us a good rating. We're still fighting with PETA to be in the top 20 of the government and organizations podcast. So where it's like a death struggle with PETA about who can get there.
Another David.
You can check out our website. Exactly, another David and Goliath. Check out our website at taxpayer.com, and be sure to join us again next week, Friday, February 19th, 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. I'm going to be away in Victoria giving a speech at a university, but Paige will be here with hopefully our Prairie Director, but we'll definitely have a co-host, and they'll be talking about all the issues that are important to taxpayers. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.